The DF64V is one of the most popular grinders featuring 64mm flat burrs and variable RPM control. At the end of 2025, the factory behind the DF64 series released its latest third-generation model. This version introduces several design updates and improvements. In this video, I'll take a detailed look at the grinder, what has changed, what works well, and what could still be improved. You can find the unboxing short video on my channel. My grinder was purchased directly from the factory for $549 including delivery to Europe. In the box, besides the grinder, you'll find a dosing cup, a wooden stand for the dosing cup, but without the magnetic strip. This was added by me for stability. A bellows with a wooden lid. An Allen key. A cleaning brush, an exit chute, and of course, the user manual. The DF64V is truly compact for a flat burr grinder. It measures 10 cm wide, 20 cm long, and 35 cm high. The weight of this grinder is 3.9 kg, and it has anti-slip pads on the bottom, making it stable on the countertop. On the left side of the DF64V is a plastic RPM knob with a display, and on the right is a silver metal on-off button. It's slightly larger than the second generation and has a more responsive click. The power cable is permanently attached and located at the back of the grinder. The grinder's housing is made of aluminum, and I chose the black version of the DF64V. The bellows lid and the base of the dosing cup are made of wood. The dosing cup is also made of aluminum. I'm not a big fan of using aluminum in parts that come into direct contact with coffee. I would prefer a stainless steel interior instead. That would help prevent coffee particles from sticking. Fortunately, the dosing cup has been completely redesigned. It looks better, the inside of the cup is more rounded, and it's more practical for use with 58mm portafilters. Thanks to the redesigned dosing cup, dosing into the portafilter is now easier, as the cup's new top ridge rests securely on the basket rather than slipping inside it. The dosing cup still needs to be placed on a wooden base, which isn't connected to the grinder at all from the factory. So I made a simple modification again using magnetic tape. It's definitely more practical. Another change in the third generation is the redesigned exit chute. It is still made of aluminum and is magnetic. The internal plasma has been removed in favor of an external one, which is located under the exit chute. Importantly, the plasma isn't active all the time. In the second generation, this was pretty annoying. You could actually hear the plasma buzzing even when the grinder wasn't grinding. In the third generation, it only activates when you're actually grinding coffee. The new plasma unit is covered with small brush-like fibers. In the DF64V Gen 2, the internal plasma could sometimes get clogged with fine coffee particles, which reduced its effectiveness. But if it were combined with the new external plasma in the Gen 3, static reduction would likely be even better. A movable metal declumper has been added, located in front of the standard declumper. Simply press it a few times, then use the bellows and tap the exit chute to remove any remaining ground coffee. Pressing the movable metal declumper releases some of the remaining coffee particles, but not a lot. Using bellows and tapping the exit chute definitely works best. The bellows is made of durable rubber. Since the DF64V is a single-dose grinder, the aluminum hopper holds up to 30 grams of beans. It's additionally equipped with an anti-popcorn lid made of stainless steel. The grinding chamber design is identical to the second generation. It's made of stainless steel. The burr carriers also have the same design. The upper burr carrier rests on a wave spring. I noticed that removing the upper burr carrier in this generation is more difficult. and require significantly more force. The burrs are 64 mm in diameter, made of stainless steel, and have a red titanium coating. I find this an improvement over the previous model, which had DLC burrs. In my experience, the DLC burrs had higher retention and the coating was more prone to wear. The geometry of these burrs strongly suggests they are designed for espresso. They have large pre-breakers, which means they will produce more fines. I've noticed that the stock burrs are still not as precise as, for example, hyper burrs or SSBs. There are some visible imperfections on the edges, as well as some dents and missing coating. I contacted the factory and was assured that this is normal and occurs as a result of factory 0-point calibration, which causes the burrs to touch while the motor is running. However, I think that for stock burrs, they are still decent and definitely satisfying for espresso. The grind size adjustment is stepless, covering a range from 0 to 90. Going below 0 is not recommended, as it will cause the burrs to make contact and may damage the grinder. I've noticed that adjusting the grind size on the new generation feels a bit more stiff. This might be because in the previous generation, it was easier to change the grind size accidentally when using the Bellows. Hey! I put a lot of work into creating my content. You can easily support me by subscribing to the channel and liking this video. It really helps my content reach more people. Thank you. The DF64V Gen 3, just like its predecessor, allows you to adjust the motor speed from 800 to 1800 revolutions per minute in 100 revolutions per minute increments. Variable revolutions per minute is especially useful in flat burr grinders. Grinding speed has a noticeable impact on the final grind and on coffee extraction. The third generation now features a new servo industrial motor with a power output of 400 watts. According to the manufacturer, this motor is even more stable and provides microsecond level response. Compared to the previous brushless motor, the sound of this one is slightly different, but still almost inaudible when no beans are in the grinder. When grinding, of course, it becomes louder, but the overall noise level is very similar to the previous generation. The motor noise ranges from about 50 decibels at the lowest RPM to about 54 decibels at the highest. While grinding coffee at 1400 RPM, I measured around 87 decibels. How do different RPM affect the grind? Until now, I believed that the higher the RPM, the more fines are produced. During my weeks of testing this grinder, it turned out to be quite the opposite. At the 800 revolutions per minute, the grinder produces significantly more fines, which extends the espresso extraction time at the same grind setting. At 1800 revolutions per minute, there are noticeably fewer fines, which also results in a shorter extraction time at the same grind setting. I also noticed something that didn't happen with the previous generation. At lower RPM, the grounds tend to clump, usually between 800 and about 1200 RPM, depending on the beans. At 1400 RPM, the clumping is mostly gone, although it can still happen occasionally, just much less than at lower speeds. I'm wondering why this happens, and I have a couple of ideas. First, the plasma isn't inside the exit chute, but outside, which increases static until the grounds actually leave the chute. Secondly, the movable metal declumper between the grinding chamber and the exit chute can cause coffee particles to become trapped and possibly regrind. Therefore, for this design, I recommend a slightly higher RPM. While in the second generation, I typically used 1100 RPM for espresso. In this case, it's 1400 RPM. I've done a lot of retention tests, taking into account variable RPMs. The test results are quite interesting. If you use RDT, which involves spraying the beans with water to reduce static, retention will always be almost zero, a maximum of 0.1 grams, although it's usually below 0.1 grams, regardless of the RPM setting. However, without RDT, retention ranged from 0.1 grams to approximately 0.3 grams. I performed retention tests at 3 RPM settings: 800, 1400, and 1800. I noticed that higher RPMs actually reduce retention, which contradicts my earlier assumption that they would produce more fines. For 800 revolutions per minute, retention was approximately 0.3 grams, and for 1400 and 1800 revolutions per minute, it was approximately 0.1 grams. I still recommend RDT though, as in my experience it reduces the retention in the grinding chamber, making the retention absolutely minimal, typically less than 0.1 grams. Using the Bellows, the movable metal declumper, and tapping the exit chute also helps reduce retention. I compared several sample grind settings at 1400 revolutions per minute. At grind setting 5, the coffee is very finely ground, finer than for the espresso range. Setting 15 is closer to my espresso range, which is between 15 and 25 depending on the beans and dose. The coffee is still finely ground. At 30, the grind becomes too coarse for espresso, though it remains finer than a typical pour-over. At 60, the grind falls within the pour-over range, which the manufacturer defines as 50 to 70. The particles are noticeably coarser. At 90, the grind is even coarser, although still not the coarsest I've seen. This suggests that the stock burr geometry produces a bimodal fine grind profile optimized for espresso. With another full 360-degree turn of the adjustment scale, I could likely reach an even coarser grind. I've made many espressos and milk-based coffees with this grinder and stock burrs. In this video, I'll be using medium roasted beans from El Salvador. According to the roaster, they have flavor notes of milk chocolate, apples, almonds, and caramel. I usually grind my beans at 1400 revolutions per minute. It seems to be the sweet spot. I use a standard 18-gram dose and a pesado EP basket. The grind time for espresso is about 9 seconds. Sometimes, after grinding the coffee, a distinct chirp sound may be produced. This phenomenon is common with flat burr grinders and is called false chirp. This happens when ground coffee residue gets stuck between the burrs. Don't worry, this isn't a grinder defect. Simply regrind the coffee or adjust the grind to a finer setting, and then return to the previous setting. I pre-infuse at 3 bar, then increase the pressure to 9 bar, gradually reducing it to 6 bar at the end of the extraction. The extraction time in this case is 30 seconds. The extraction is quite stable, but it's not about the look, it's about the taste. So how does the DF64V Gen 3 perform in espresso? The body is quite high, the espresso is dense with a thick crema. It's quite well balanced, the bitterness isn't overpowering, and the acidity is moderate. Overall, I've always been satisfied with the espresso made with this grinder. This grinder offers a lot of flexibility, both through variable RPM and the easy ability to swap burrs. I bought this grinder specifically for espresso, but let's see how it performs for pour-over. I set the grind size to 60, which is in the middle of the manufacturer's recommended range of 50 to 70. In this case, I'm brewing 15 grams of coffee at a 1:16 ratio and I want to get about 3 minutes of extraction time. Grinding time is approximately 7 seconds at 1400 revolutions per minute. Very fast. If you're a regular viewer, you probably know I'm not the biggest fan of pour-over, though I'm turning to this brewing method more and more often. The extraction time was 3.5 minutes, which is a bit longer than I expected. However, it's not a significant difference for me. I think these beans are better suited for espresso. This is definitely not the best pour-over coffee I've ever brewed. It's flat and lacks any distinctive flavor notes. But overall, this grinder is also suitable for this brewing method, although I would recommend changing the burrs to ones with geometry more suited to pour-over or multi-purpose. The stock DF64V burrs have large pre-breakers, which results in more fines and less clarity in filter coffee. Cleaning this grinder is almost identical to the previous generation. First, I remove the wooden base with the dosing cup. I clean the dosing cup with a brush or a soft cloth. It can also be washed occasionally with detergent. Then I remove the exit chute and use a handheld vacuum cleaner, blower, and brush to clean all the components, removing any remaining coffee dust. It's worth paying special attention to cleaning the plasma. It's covered in brush-like fibers, which also easily collect coffee dust. Once I remove the bellows, I can try cleaning it with a brush or cloth, but rinsing it with water is the most effective method. It's important to dry it before using it again. Next, I disassemble the anti-popcorn element for cleaning. Just pull it upwards. Now I unscrew the hopper counterclockwise to disassemble and clean it. Then I remove the bearing and unscrew the dial scale collar. It's sometimes worth wiping down the upper burr carrier as it may contain residual grease. Now I use a metal element, like a spoon, to pry up the upper burr carrier. This wasn't necessary in the previous generation, but here the rubber elements hold it in place much more securely. I thoroughly clean the lower and upper burrs, as well as the grinding chamber, using a blower, a brush, and a handheld vacuum cleaner. It's also worth noting how the movable metal declumper works. It's a very simple solution that still relies on a standard declumper design. These components also need regular cleaning. Once the grinder has been cleaned, all components need to be reassembled. The upper burr carrier must be installed in the same position marked at the factory with a black marker. Sometimes it may be necessary to recalibrate the 0 point. This is especially common when the grinder is new and the burrs still need to be seasoned. To do this, I set the RPM to the lowest value and adjust the grind size to a slightly coarser setting, for example around 10, and then switch the grinder on. From there, I slowly move toward a finer setting until I hear the burrs making contact. I then back off slightly toward a coarser grind and switch the grinder off. This is where I want to set the 0 point. Using an Allen key, I loosen the ring with the grind setting indicator. Then I align the indicator with 0 and tighten the screw again. Very simple. Overall, the DF64V Gen 3 is, in my opinion, just another pretty good version of a proven grinder, even if it still has a few quirks. And honestly, I think the manufacturer could have gone a step further with the improvements. I mean, imagine the DF64V with a redesigned base with a magnetic dosing cup instead of a loose wooden stand, a better designed exit chute, a more effective declumper, dual plasma, internal and external, and maybe even the blind burrs that are quickly becoming the norm. But don't get me wrong, this is still a genuinely solid grinder. The grind quality, especially for espresso, is really satisfying. Additionally, it is extremely versatile and works with many 64mm burr sets. Even some resellers recommend SSP burrs specifically for the DF64V. Would I buy it again? Given that I was looking for a compact flat burr grinder, yeah, I probably would. Admittedly, I upgraded from Gen 2 to Gen 3, which didn't really make sense since it's more of an evolution than a revolution, but I was very curious about the new version and wanted to record a video about it. However, if I didn't have the DF64V grinder and had to choose between Gen 2 and Gen 3 today, I would definitely choose Gen 3. It's slightly better. But keep in mind, in this price range, there are some very interesting alternatives worth considering. And now I'm curious, what do you think about the DF64V? Have you tried the 3rd generation model yet? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your experiences. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.